Hello everyone, it's Heather from MCI Designs. Today we're going to do a quick flip cup pour. So what I'm going to get started with, I've got my paints all mixed. I'm going to use some Artist Loft Black, and these have all been mixed with Floetrol and a little bit of water. This is an Artist Loft White. This is I think a Winsor & Newton Opera Rose. And this is a Grumbacher Prussian Blue. And this is an Artist Loft Green Yellow with some iridescent medium added to it. So it's got a little bit of sparkle. All right, so we're going to do a standard flip cup. So I'm just going to move this out of the way. I already poured a little bit of white in the bottom of the cup. I think this is like a 9-ounce glass, somewhere like that. We're not going to need that much. So we've added a little bit of white, and then we are going to layer in our colors. So this is the Prussian Blue. This one has a little bit of silicone in it. This is some stuff that I had made from yesterday. So when you're pouring your paint into your pour cup, if you pour it from higher up or closer to the cup, you're going to achieve a different result. So if you pour it from higher up, the force of the paint going in will cause the paint to push down further into the mix. So if you want them more separated and layered, you want to pour closer to the bottom of the cup versus from up high. If you want it to drill down through all the other layers and mix more in the cup, you'll pour it from higher up. So I'm going to pour it from a little further down. Add a little bit of blue. And then let's try some Opera Rose. And I think the Opera Rose might also have a bit of pouring medium, or iridescent medium, sorry, in it. So we've got that. And let's add a little bit of white. And we're going to add a little bit of the yellow green. Give it a little mix. Might be a little on the thick side, but I think that'll be okay. Let's punch it up a little bit and just put a tiny little bit of black in there. Not sure what that's going to do, but we shall see. Let's see. Maybe a little bit more pink. And I don't want much. I'm just going to drizzle a little bit onto the top of the cup. And a little bit of blue. Maybe a little bit more. And let's finish it off with a little bit more of that bright yellow green. There we go. Now all that is probably, I don't know, 2 ounces, maybe. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this onto our canvas. So let me bring that into view. So we've got a 9x12 canvas from Michaels with the push pins on the back. And I've got a little piece of parchment paper on top of my tray to catch any of the drippings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it and I'm going to flip it over. And I'm just going to let that sit. Ooh, looks like we got a lot of green in there. If you can see, Well, you can't see, but I can see there's already cells forming on the inside with the paint. Now I want to have a little bit of white negative space because this paint will not be enough to cover the entire canvas. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to lay down a layer of white. And I'm going to use a palette knife. Make sure your palette knife is clean. And I'm going to spread that around to cover the entire canvas and the sides. Don't worry too much if it drips over the edge. And it doesn't need to be perfectly flat because we're going to be tipping and tilting, and that will shift things as it goes. It will all level out in the end. But if you feel like you haven't got quite enough paint on there, go ahead and add some more. But just be aware that the paint coming out of the cup is going to add to the volume on the surface. So a lot of this white is going to get pushed off to the side. Anyway, now you can use your palette knife to cover your edges. Or if you want to get your hands dirty, you can get in there and move the paint around with your fingers. And because this is a clean piece of parchment paper underneath the canvas, you can always take the drippings that have fallen over the edge so far and scrape them up and onto the canvas. Or you can take your water bottle, or your white in the bottle, and just put a little more along the edge and push it over. Kind of depends. You don't want to waste paint, but you want to make sure you've got good coverage too. But don't forget too, if you're going to have a lot of white negative space in your painting, if you miss a spot on the side, as long as it's not a spot where color is going over the edge, you can always touch it up. And while it's wet, you always have the opportunity to pick up more paint off of the bottom and move it around to cover any spots that you might have missed. Like I'm not going to be able to see this side super clearly because my head will be in your way. There we go. That's a little bit better. Okay, so my sides are covered. My base layer is down. And we're ready to get going. Okay. One thing that you'll also want to have handy is some paper towel. I tend to be a little bit messy and I like to get my hands in there. And sometimes you need to wipe them off. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tilt this canvas up a little bit. And I'm going to push and pull. Look at the inside of that. That's really pretty. But it seems to have lost most of that lovely green. So what we're going to do is we're going to tip. And tilt. Until we get something that we like. Take that right over the edge. Let's move that paint back into the middle. And move it down and around until we get something that we like. Now, you don't have to take it all the way to the edge. You can leave some nice white sides, but because I've already taken it over the edge on the right side, I'm going to take it over the edge on the left as well, and then bring it back. And we're going to leave just the negative space at the top and the bottom of the painting. Okay, so I like that. Now I'm messy. Here comes paper towel. Give the fingers a wipe. Coverage in that spot. Okay, so that's kind of stage one. So I really like that, but I don't see any of that lovely green. So I'm going to torch it. Get rid of some of these air bubbles. And see if that helps bring any of those colors out. You don't want to torch it too close, and you don't want to torch it too long, because you don't want your top layer of paint to dry faster than the paint underneath. That's when you end up getting cracks. Also, if your paint is too thick, you're going to end up getting cracks. So you want to move the paint around enough so that you don't have a big glob of paint right in the center where you're going to get cracking, but you want to try and keep your design. So it's always kind of the little happy balance to try and find. But what I'm loving is that right there. It looks like a little eye. So what we're going to do is we're going to let this sit for a minute, and I'll be right back. I'm just going to grab a tool. Okay, so what I've got here is a straw, and this is a dotting tool that they use in nail salons. So you can add to this pour, like say I want to make some little wispies out of it, or I want to move some of the paint around because I don't like this necessarily. So what I can do is you can use the straw to blow the paint, or I can use the dotting tool to pull little bits of paint. Like here, we've got this lovely little swoop. Maybe we'll want to make a similar one on this side. So who knows, maybe we can take a little bit like that, just to give it some movement. And since the swoops seem to be going this way, I'm going to keep the movement aspect of it and try and be consistent with that. Yeah, I like that. You don't want it to look too mechanical. You want it to be fairly organic. But if you want to just give it a little extra, while it's wet, you've got that opportunity to do whatever you want. So this could be some kind of like weird fish with an eye in the middle of his body, or whatever you want it to be, really. But you can see that certain colors have sunk and certain colors have risen. Now there's a lot of white on the surface because white was at the bottom of our cup. So when you flip it upside down, that's on top. So you have to be careful when you're doing your pour to layer your paints in the order where you know that they're going to show up. Like if you want more blue, you might want to put blue at the bottom of the cup. And you also need to be aware of the paint densities as well. Paints that have heavier densities, such as white, like titanium white is one of the ones that has one of the heaviest densities, and it tends to sink in a pour, which is why a lot of people put it on the bottom. So they get the white on the top that will sink down through the other colors. And the ones with the lighter densities will tend to rise in a pour. So you end up with little pops of color coming up as the white goes down. So I think this one looks pretty good. If we wanted to add a little bit more detail, we could try blowing out some of the edges to make it a little bit more ephemeral in the look, rather than very linear. So you can use the straw to blow in whatever direction you choose, and you can blow the paint and move it around. So I'm hoping I'm not getting my head right in the way, but we'll give this a whirl. Now you also want to be aware of the directionality and make sure you don't get condensation in your straw blown out onto your painting. And you don't want to wait too long to attempt to do the straw, because the more your paint dries, the less movement you'll get, and then you'll end up getting it all mucked up. Now, as you can see, when I've gone and done the straw through here, what we've got is this is some silicone that's working its way to the top. And some of the colors that are underneath are starting to come up as you move the different layers of paint over top of each other. So let's do something similar along the bottom. There. So that gives it a little bit of something extra. I didn't want to wreck those because it's probably one of the only spots where our lovely green is coming out. But it's often fun to see what develops. So this painting has the blue, the opera rose, and the yellow green with white and a little bit of black just to give it a little bit of extra kick and a little bit of contrast. And you can see not much of the green has come through, except little bits here and there and here and there, little bits. But mostly the blue and the opera rose have come through. Now the blue is one of those colors that tends to be a little bit of a bully, depending on the shade. So just keep that in mind when you're painting. But this is the kind of thing that you can play with and do whatever you like. You can modify it as much as you want. If you hate it, you can swipe the whole thing and see what happens. A lot of times a crappy pour can be saved by a good swipe. So if you pour something and you absolutely hate it, do a swipe right over top. And some of my best swipes have come from an absolutely horrid pour. So anyway, that's kind of the basics of your basic kind of flip and drag flip cup. Yeah, so I'm Heather with MCI Designs on Instagram at MCI Designs, and come see us at our Facebook group, Acrylic Pouring and Fluid Art Canada. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon if you want to see and be reminded of more videos as they get posted. Thank you very much. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.